Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It is a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. The weather is cloudy. It's got that kind of cotton ball look to it, although dirty cotton balls, they're all dark gray. So I don't think it's going to rain on me while I'm out walking today, but it looks like it could rain sometime today. We're also at that weird point in the spring where some of the trees have this like red stuff that they're putting off. It might be pollen, I guess. I don't know what it is, but the ground's all covered in this like sort of red, little bits of red stuff, which, you know, is kind of gross. Also, tons of background noise today. I'm walking, there's a big construction site right near my house, so you're going to pick up a little of that as we walk by. In fact, I'm going to through the magic of editing, you're going to not hear the construction site as I walk by it. Well, I hope that it's been a good month for you. It's been nearly a month since I did my last movie-focused episode, and so I'm returning to that today. Today is our March movie roundup. March was a busy movie month for me. I'm not really sure why, what it was about the rhythm of that month that resulted in me watching more films than I had the previous month, but I ended up watching a ton of them, 14 in fact. Part of it was that it was spring break, so I watched a movie almost every day that I was in spring break. So I got a bunch of those done, and that'll affect the April count as well. So I'm not going to talk about all 14 because that would be like 1 minute per movie, and I don't even see the point of that. So what I'm going to do is talk about movies. I have my list here. I'm just going to look at one, look at the list, talk about that movie until I feel like I'm done talking about it, and kind of do it in the order that I have something to say about the movies. And when I'm just about out of time, I'll tell you the other movies I watched, and you can wish that I had said something about them. And if you find that you really want to talk about them, we've got a Board Game Geek Guild for that. So that's where we can start. I think I'll start with Housebound. Housebound is a really interesting horror movie from New Zealand, which I enjoyed quite a bit. And I would say that it has a character to it that is not something I expected. It feels like it's in the same oeuvre as other movies about the creepiness of the home. This is a genre that has come and go for a long time, but it's always been around, this idea that something could come get you in your home. You know, a famous one might be The Exorcist, where the little girl finds a Ouija board in the basement and bad things happen. More recently, we've seen movies like The Babadook or Hereditary or what was that one? Relic, which are all about people in homes and their homes become eerie and terrifying. And that's kind of what's going on in Housebound. But Housebound has a comedic element to it as well that works really well. It is definitely not, I would definitely call it horror with a hint of comedy. I wouldn't call it a horror comedy, although it is funnier than most horror movies, and some of the moments are outright hilarious. And so the premise is this young woman who has been committing various kinds of crime, mostly related to her drug addiction in New Zealand, is sentenced to 9 months of house arrest at her mother's house. And she and her mother are kind of estranged because she's been a jerk because of her drug addiction and her antisocial behavior. And so she doesn't, of course, want to live there. And I guess that her mother has always maintained that their house is haunted. And so the daughter is dealing with discovering that, in fact, her mother is not totally crazy about the things that she's heard. Lots of really interesting stuff there. If anyone has seen this and would like to talk about it in more detail, I'd recommend it if you like sort of mildly creepy horror movies. There's some gory stuff in it, but it's not the most terrifying. But it does have an interesting plot that doesn't go where you expect that it would, which is nice because a lot of these movies, you can kind of see where they're going to go. There are tropes, and there's a reason that a horror movie has tropes, because part of what's enjoyable about them is our expectation that they will go where we thought they would go. And so this one doesn't quite go where you think it's going to go, and I really enjoyed it. So check that out. Housebound, it's called. I picked that one up because I had heard somewhere that The Night House was a really good sort of Lovecraftian horror movie, and I couldn't remember whether it was House of Night or Night House, and so I was just looking for it on the shelf at my library. And so while I was looking for House of Night, I found Housebound, yeah, so Night House was really interesting, much more on the creepy side. There's not really any humor in it, but the premise is it's this woman whose husband has unfortunately killed himself, and she is trying to deal with, the grief-stricken aftermath of that, and then she starts to see things and hear things that suggest that he's in fact, that there was something more going on. And it's super eerie and tied into the idea of sort of mysterious, arcane things. It reminds me a lot, actually, and I'm not really sure why, but it reminds me a lot, actually, of the novel House of Leaves, which is about, there's a whole lot going on with that book, but a big part of the House of Leaves is this idea of a house that has more in it than you know it does. And so the Night House was really compelling. It's beautifully shot. Lots of really interesting visual work in the movie, stuff that just looks striking as you're watching, very eerie. And that one reminded me a little bit too of the movie I watched recently, Absentia, which is also about a woman dealing with the loss of her husband. So I'm not sure why I keep watching these grief movies, but there it is. So that is The Night House. All right, let's talk about something that's not a horror movie right away. Did watch a few non-horror movies. How about Gravy? Oh, this movie, geez Louise. So I watched this because I'm a big fan of the TV show Psych. Psych, of course, is the TV show starring James Rodriguez and Dule Hill, and it's about a guy who is not in fact psychic but pretends to be psychic in order to solve crimes and make money from the police department. And it's funny. It's a very funny show. And I was listening to an interview with James Rodriguez, and he was talking about how he had made a horror comedy movie called Gravy. And so then I went and looked it up. It's not great. There are parts of it that are pretty good. I would say the biggest problem with it, as one person wrote on their not very nice review on Letterboxd, nobody in the movie speaks like an actual person speaks. Everybody talks in these sort of crafted, quippy ways that feel crafted and quippy, as opposed to like somebody like Aaron Sorkin or the writers for the Joss Whedon shows generally had a way of making characters be quippy, but also still have a coherent conversation. And this movie had a little too clever for its own good in it, in a way that I think didn't really work. But there's some funny ideas in it and good performances, and I enjoyed myself watching it, even if it was really not great. The premise is some murderous cannibals take over a restaurant and slowly kill and eat the people who are running it. It's sort of like if House of a Thousand Clowns had been made by John Landis or something. I think that, it's like super gory and horrific, but also silly in a way that, I enjoyed, but it's pretty dark. So, not sure I'd recommend that one, but that's Gravy. Didn't I say I wasn't going to talk about a horror movie again? Oops. Well, another movie I want to mention that I enjoyed quite a bit was The Weekend Away. This was a thriller, a romantic thriller, about a woman who goes away for a weekend with her best friend, or a good friend, and she goes to, I don't think it's Paris. I don't know that they say what city it is, but I feel like it's like Prague or something. Darn, I don't remember what city it was. But she goes away for a weekend with her friend to this city, and things just sort of spiral out of control. Her friend disappears, and she is trying to figure out what happened to her friend, and the local authorities don't want to listen. It's got a very sort of Sunshine Noir vibe to it. Something bad has happened. She can't really figure out what's going on. As she learns more, things get weirder and more dangerous, and it's a nice thriller, solid representation of the genre there. That's The Weekend Away. I think we watched that one on Netflix. I did watch the recent action movie starring Ryan Reynolds and a couple other people. Zoe Saldana had a small part in it, and Catherine Keener, and everybody's favorite, or my favorite, Mark Ruffalo, reminding me again that if they let me decide and cast a remake of Columbo, that Mark Ruffalo will be my first call and my last call. And I'll say, no, I'm not doing it if it's not Mark Ruffalo. Man, he could play the out of Columbo. Pardon my French. But anyway, so the Adam Project, it was okay. Not amazing, but an amusing time travel romp in which Ryan Reynolds meets a boy who is essentially doing a Ryan Reynolds impersonation, or like, what would 12-year-old Ryan Reynolds be like? And there's a whole bunch of action and a little bit of comedy and some time traveling jets and nonsense sci-fi, and it was good fun. My main critique would be that they had several really compelling women in the movie. Zoe Saldana and Catherine Keener I already mentioned, but also Jennifer Garner, and they gave them almost nothing to do. That really, in this day and age, I don't need another movie about 3 guys. I mean, it's fine, okay. It was fine. I just, Zoe Saldana's too cool to leave that way. But, you know, it was fine. It was fun. Worth a watch, I think. I watched Network, which was interesting. This was in follow-up to my screening earlier of Broadcast News, thinking I was watching Network. Boy, Network is bizarre. That is a weird movie, folks. It was made in the late 60s, and it has this sensibility. It has a sort of, you feel like the screenwriters were reading Marshall McLuhan, and they were talking about how, you know, modern media is going to destroy the world, man. And just, you know, you think about, like, there's like a through line from Network to the world presented in the Running Man. Like, this weird escalation of the idea of the cult of personality of television, which, of course, you know, we elected a reality star president in the United States here, and things went about as badly as could be expected from that discussion. And actually, you know, 10 years after Network, we elected Ronald Reagan president. And so it's not like this was unforeseen. But Network is the movie that has that famous sequence where the newscaster, angry that he's being fired, or angry about the world, goes on TV and shouts that people need to go to the window and yell, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." It is a satire, certainly, and it's a well-written one, I think. It loses some of its potency now just because the hot buttons that it was touching on are either we've come to accept them, and so it feels like, yeah, okay, that's a critique we've all heard before, or that isn't a thing that happened, in which case then that critique feels even weirder. Of course, a critique of a thing that we've all heard before, that's sort of like the old canard from the Woody Allen movie where he overhears someone in line saying, you know, I like Shakespeare, but the stories are so trite. This idea that, or generic, the idea that Shakespearean stories have been overtold. And like, yeah, because they're Shakespearean, right? They weren't overtold when he told them. And I feel like some of that's going on with Network. A weird movie I'm not sure I'd recommend unless you're really into that, the sort of thing that would lead you to watch a 1960s satire about media. Let's see, the dumbest movie I watched this month is probably Slacks. I first heard about this movie in reference on my favorite movie review podcast, which is called Linoleum Knife. This is a podcast from film critic Alonso Duralde and Dave White. They are a married gay couple, both of who are very skilled and experienced film critics. Alfonso Duralde is the film critic reviews editor at The Wrap, and they're excellent. There are a few places that I've found that have such cogent and thoughtful discussion of cinema as their podcast does, so I'd recommend. But anyway, at one point, they mentioned a sort of nonsense throwaway indie film about a pair of murderous jeans, and the movie's called Slacks, and it's Slaxx. And I watched this movie, and it doesn't meet the criterion of being good in very many ways at all. I wouldn't call it great. I wouldn't even necessarily call it all that well made, but I sure had a good time watching it. So the premise is there is a Gap type store, and they are just getting ready to have a new public release of the new line of clothes for that store, and all of the members of the store kind of treat it like a cult, and they are super excited for the different things that get sold at the store. The big reveal is that the store is going to be the sole proprietor or sole location of this brand new line of jeans that are super slimming or whatever, so it's supposed to be very, very tight. Of course, it turns out that the jeans are evil and murderous. And they kill people. At first, they kill people just by sort of squeezing them to death, but then as they drink more blood, they become more mobile and able, and they start running around. Oh, it is Such nonsense, but it is delightful nonsense, and I recommend that you check it out if you get a chance. I saw it on AMC Plus, which is something we signed up for this year, and I've really enjoyed having. I don't know if it would be worth it to me to have it for $5 a month, but we're paying $2 a month for it because it was on sale for a year. So I paid $24, I think, for a year, and at that rate, I'm enjoying it. I found quite a bit of stuff to watch, and I'm trying to make the most of it. So that's Slacks. The last movie I'll talk about quick, we watched on HBO Max, we watched Death on the Nile, the next of the Kenneth Branagh Hercule Poirot movies. Like Murder on the Orient Express, this was a beautifully shot, careful adaptation of the classic Agatha Christie novel. I don't know that it needed to be made, but I sure enjoyed watching it. It's beautiful people running around in beautiful clothes getting murdered. The setting, the boat that they use in the movie was gorgeous, and they shot it. I don't know if they actually shot it in Egypt or they just like sort of fabricated these Egypt sets, but they are beautiful. All in all, an excellent depiction of the piece, except that, of course, Hercule Poirot is like half the weight he should be. He is described as being rotund, as being a gourmand, as being overweight, kind of pudgy, kind of egg-like, and David Suchet will always be my Hercule Poirot, and so the Kenneth Branagh one just never quite does it for me. That said, it was quite enjoyable. All right, I did not get a chance to talk about today, but I rewatched the most recent of the Riddick movies. It's just called Riddick. It was fun. Turning Red is great. You should watch that on Disney. Stop and Go was a delightful road trip movie. Antlers was a weird horror movie about the Wendigo, directed by or produced by Guillermo del Toro, but not directed by him. It was fine. Could have been better. Windfall, a great little character study with Jesse Plemons and Jason Segel and an actor, I can't remember her name. Shoot. Embarrassed about that. And finally, Hellbound Hellraiser 2, which was just bizarre. Really weird movie. It really built up this idea that started in the first one about what the Cenobites are and how they operate and why they would come get you. So I guess worth watching if you liked the first one. I think I'm going to go in and watch the rest of the series, but I'm not sure I want to, or I'm not sure I should. But anyway, that's what I'm doing. What did you watch in March? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and join the conversation there. Let me know what you watched. If you want to know a little bit more about Housebound, let me know, and I can post a little bit more there if you've seen it. I think it'd be fun to talk about with people that I don't mind giving full spoilers. Now, if you want to send me a message directly, you can email me, brendan@rattleboxgames.com, or you can send me a message on Board Game Geek. Wombat929 is my username there. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk and your next movie experience are a pleasant one. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.